Hey all, so lucky to have a good friend of mine, Mr Lawry Scandar, on the show with us today. This is one of the best shows I've ever recorded when it comes to truly how to lead excellence and achieve great results. Lawry's drawing his career at Incitec and also working with many other organisations. The great show, well spoken, delivered really well on how to gain knowledge to actually lead out and take your organisation to a new level. We're going to explore concepts of leadership values, how to truly create self-led or autonomous teams, shift your culture, and truly take your organisation to another level. There's resources up on the Enterprise Excellence podcast on this topic around how to lead excellence. Please feel free to go there and download under resources. Really looking forward to you listening to this show. I'm going to be listening to it many more times to come. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence podcast, where we aim to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve and create enduring, high-performance, low-impact enterprises. Learn how to enhance morale, customer and purpose centricity, focus, and calmness. Learn how to create and sustain a culture of excellence at all levels of your organisation.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 167 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. Such a pleasure to have Mr Lawry Scandar on the show with us today. Lawry I met probably a year ago in passing, and I think it was just amazing how much our lives have crossed, even though you're a different generation away, Lawry, to
that's an interesting way to put it, yep. All right, yeah, the beard was black and short then, and more hair.
But the field of enterprise excellence, and we connected, and what I love, Lawry, with chatting to you about it was just the piece of psychology you've applied to it. You know, you got that organisational psychology background, but then you've also got this passion for enterprise excellence.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to explore today, really, is the psychology of excellence and leadership and play. And I just really appreciate you coming on the show to share your knowledge, mate.
It's a pleasure. Be a bit of fun.
Yeah.
See where we go.
Yeah, so Lawry, I'm keen to go back a bit on it, mate, and just have a chat to you about, like, the time that you got involved learning organisational psychology and then enterprise excellence. Like, that's not even done heavily now, let alone... When were you learning that space and stuff, and why did you go about it?
I guess if I go back into my career, this really started in the corporate sector where we, to be honest, we're flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah.
We're going through some fairly significant changes. Obviously, my focus was around the people, the human resource area. And, you know, everyone talked about change management, but what was missing was, at a very simplistic level, the people engagement part.
Yeah.
Lots of words for it, but in terms of the actual hands-on strategy and implementation, I didn't see a lot of that. So we studied a lot of things, learnt a lot of things, tried a lot of things. To be honest, a lot of it started with some basic common sense. It's not the stuff I learnt in my 2 centuries ago degrees or anything. It was literally seat of our pants.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And so you had that psychology background through your degree. You've ended up in HR. I think you were connected with John, I forget John's last name.
John Warnock?
John Warnock.
Yes.
Who we both know.
Yeah. We were in the fertiliser industry for many years together, and he was one of those guys I would say would have been one of those passionate leaders that made sense and actually authentically implemented the people side. So pleasure to work with
you. They had some good leadership there. And what company was it again, Lawry?
This was Incitec.
Incitec.
Yeah, very different to the Incitec of today in terms of its ownership and culture, no doubt. But we did a lot of good work there.
Well, I was chatting to someone from Incitec just the other day. I was on a plane next to them, and they were revering the era back through the 80s and 90s that you guys did what
that
you
was
did.
It.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so you were from that people and culture and HR side. And half the gig that we talk about in whether we're trying to deploy lean or TQM back then, I know it was for you, total quality management, or agile, is that we miss the human factor in the HR side. And you focus on the tools and techniques versus the people. But you guys, you and John and the rest of the team were pulling it together back in the 80s and going, no, this is not about a tools and technique journey, this is about a people journey.
Well, it's actually about both. It's not one or the other, it's actually the hand in glove, the integration of what I guess you could call the rational part of the system or the change, you know, the organisation, the structure, the systems, the processes, etc. And the non-rational, some would say irrational, but mainly the non-rational side, which is people, their sense of identity in the organisation, their sense of purpose, their sense of focus and engagement, and how they play that out.
Yeah.
Melding the two together.
Yeah, so Peter Hines is a guy I revere and know a lot, Dr. Peter Hines. He shows often, Laurie, this bridge where he's got the lean or TQM agile journey coming from one side and the people and culture HR side coming from the other side, and the bridge is broken in the middle. You know what I mean? It's not connected.
There's a lot of broken bridges out there.
Yeah, a lot of broken bridges.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm keen on, what inspired you from the HR side to actually engage in this journey and connect the bridge, where most of the time, mate, it doesn't happen? HR's working on their bit over here and people and culture, and then you got business improvement and the process people doing work over here.
Yeah.
Why did you engage and connect and bridge?
Yeah, for sure. I guess for me, if I look at my early career, very naive into it, and as I said, learn by the seat of your pants, I saw, simply put, a lot of talk and a lot of damage. And the damage was because the talk wasn't followed through with in terms of the people engagement side of it.
Yeah.
And I suppose in those days we were very much focused on bottom line. Change was a thing that was imposed. You know, all organisations for survival go through what I would call discontinuous change from time to time. What's the next era of what we're going to change? And that's systemic usually. But the non-rational side, when it's not dealt with properly, what's missing is people will play with the change. But what I saw was the so-called hearts and minds weren't on board in a lot of cases. People were left flailing and trying to work out, you know, who am I in this shift, in this change, and why am I not being engaged in a way that I can get a sense of that and develop that, or even be a part of it.
Yeah.
So I think I saw a lot of that, and I suppose I'll use this language. I was probably a victim of it in some of my early career stages, where through some organisational change, I wasn't well treated, and I thought, well, okay, well, it's not just me. And I'm in the area where I can actually start to influence and make a difference. Let's work out how.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was that self-drive that really engaged you to collaborate with people like John and other leaders to actually make this transformation work.
Yeah.
Versus, did senior leadership play a part too, mate? Like the leader above you or the CEO, did they play a good part to help bring you guys together too? Or was it more just in that top leadership level of Incitec that you went, no, we got to make this work?
I think in those days, and I would say it was probably rare, we were quite fortunate that we did have, generally, a few exceptions, we had a senior leadership team, or management team, as they would have called themselves, that wanted to do this. They were actually focused, and if I look across my career in consulting, even to this day, we're talking, as you say, the 80s and 90s, 2 centuries ago, you know, it's still rare. So we were quite fortunate that we had the freedom to actually go about doing what we did without the repercussions of you don't get it wrong or you've got a problem.
Yeah. You know,
so we're allowed to play.
You're right. As a senior leadership team, you felt safe. You had a good teamwork going on, and you had safety for if something did fail. But
safety with parameters.
Parameters.
You know, there are conditions, if you like. Okay, don't go too far. Experiment, play. Let's see what works.
Yeah.
But you know, when you come across something that's not working, assess why, and do we actually tweak it, or do we find another alternative?
Yeah. And I could imagine the alternate, which I've been in one of those alternate leadership teams, where the knives are out, and there's just no safety to have anything slip, and so you're not going to get collaboration. You're not going to work as a unit.
Yeah.
So you were there at a time where you had this tight-knit unit of a leadership management team, because leadership was not a common word back then, was it? It was more management.
It wasn't. You know, when we first started running, I started running leadership programs. It was like, what the hell is this thing? We didn't have the language.
Yeah.
You know, so we did some of the Hersey Blanchard situational leadership work, and it was good. And it actually sparked something in some of these senior managers. They got on board with it. It's like, oh, okay, we like this. We can be a little bit different. We can actually get engagement.
Yeah.
I think they started to see a shift in the culture. So remembering, we're talking about probably a 3 to 5 year process to actually start to bed some of the behaviours down culturally.
Yeah.
It's not just do a training program. Oh, we've got it, as one manager used to think it was.
Yeah. It takes time, doesn't it, to alter behaviour and culture.
Yep.
So, Lawry, if we talk on Incitec more, and for listeners, Lawry's worked with many, many companies. So I guess there's that time in your career, isn't it? That was Incitec, but also past, if you don't mind, Lawry, I wouldn't mind hanging in Incitec just a bit, because
Absolutely.
I do know some of the leaders that were involved, like John and others, and it's such an amazing story. But, mate, you had TQM coming into the company and getting this autonomy and bottom-up focus on quality and continuous improvement. But if we chat on the behaviour side, which you were very focused on, mate, what did you find as the approach to start to be able to alter the behaviours in the organisation to start to support the transformation to total quality management and everything else you did? Like, I know you mentioned you had a lot of experimentation you had to do, but if you don't mind explaining some of that key formula that you got to and you're like, Brad, here's where it started to work for us.
Formula might be a little bit too much license to use that word, but at the same time, around that time, we were also hearing a lot about the so-called North American model of self-managed work teams. And a lot of that was becoming a focus for a lot of senior managers. They were hearing this at seminars and with their peer groups and so on. And they said, well, it seems to be working. It seems to be a part of what has to happen. So they were actually being exposed to it without understanding how to deliver, how to roll it out. So again, for us, we had a quality management team, and thankfully it was headed up by a couple of three really, really good guys. So one's not with us anymore, unfortunately, but Peter and Cole and her name's gone, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we had some great guys. They understood the need to actually create processes and programs for people to be involved in. We got the approval, the understanding, and then the approval from the senior management team to roll this out across all employee levels.
Wow.
All employee, from senior management right down to shop floor operators. So hence when we started to do things such as the quality management teams or the quality teams and the focus groups, they had systems and structures, great, but they also had learnt a lot of the behaviours, the behaviours of collaboration, the behaviours of challenging in a way where I would use the language, we created behaviour intelligence with them. So if you like, it's that meld between what a lot of people would call emotional intelligence and conversation intelligence, using linguistics in a way that creates influence and shift and engagement. So way back then, we didn't have that language for it. We just didn't. We just did stuff. So we ran team development programs, we ran focus group training, facilitator training, and this was all brave new world. It was like suddenly we're doing this human factor stuff rather than operator training or finance for non-accountants training and all the rest of it, which we still did. So we actually had culturised that, and I would say it took about 3 to 4 years before we started to see that it just was starting to emanate in people's way of working.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's a long-winded way of saying there's no real formula. Sorry.
But like you're mentioning there, Lauren, if I'm hearing it right, you're mentioning about you're developing people's capability to use language in a way that creates positive outcomes in situations. And one question I've got on this you mentioned Ken Blanchard's work earlier on situational leadership, which I'm guessing played a part.
In the early days, yes.
Laurie, how did you go about it? Was it developing leadership first and then frontline in this, or was it developing everyone at the same time to be able to get to this place of self-led teams?
Good point. We actually did kick off with a whole suite of leadership development programs using the SIT leadership model, the Hershey-Blanchard model, for the senior and middle management groups first. And that was where we started to play. Well, now we need to roll this out across all levels. Because at that point, they started to open up to probably something that they already had a sense was lacking in the organisation, is that engagement factor. I mean, it's not just doing it for the sake of feel good. There was a reason for it. We needed outcomes. But we needed people to have their hearts and minds engaged to work towards those outcomes. And the old systemic approach of control, tell, do, wasn't going to cut it, because the level of change was, over time, was so significant. It wasn't just tweaking the edges. This was a completely different way of working.
I love it. I really love that conversation too, mate, around how you built leadership capability through using a lot of Ken Blanchard's work, and also You know, you're developing leaders to know that we're going to self-led teams. And then you're actually developing the teams themselves on how do they then use language, how do they lead? Because I guess in self-led teams, you're ending up with teams of people who everyone's a leader in relation to their leading that path forward, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll give you a really good example of that. And it's not that self-managed teams were actually the way. That was just our context at the time.
Yeah.
But I recall at one point being in one of the manufacturing sites, one of the works. And at that point in time, the teams had got to the point of being able to, something as simple as something goes wrong in the plant, they didn't have to have 3-4 signatures of leading hands and supervisors and someone else to get a washer out of the, or a screw out of the workshop parts area.
Yeah.
Right? So they could make their own decisions. They were responsible and accountable. So we talked about empowerment, but we wanted to make sure empowerment was not just this tokenism. So we talked about you're informed, you know what you're doing, and the context within what you're doing fits.
Yeah.
So you're informed.
Yeah.
You're skilled according to the level that we need you in the role.
Yeah.
And we hold you accountable and responsible relative to your level of skill.
Yeah.
So we made that package almost the mantra behind any of the development.
Yeah.
So what I saw one day was there was, for some reason, something went wrong, and the management had a site meeting with the senior guys, the middle management of the manufacturing site, and they essentially rescinded that. They took that ability from one of the self-managed teams away. These guys came out, it was like a funeral when they were told about it. They were gutted. It's like, we've worked so hard to develop, it's only a simple thing, you know, we're accountable for the parts. But they took that responsibility and accountability away when they'd worked so hard for it. The fact that they got so upset about it, we later rectified it. They felt that you had pulled the rug out from under them. That told me that we were starting to actually have a cultural impact, behaviourally. Like they meant it, they owned that, this was the maintenance crew, they owned the whole maintenance area. That was their accountability. It was theirs.
Yeah.
Don't mess with us.
Yeah.
We've got this.
Yeah, that's nice.
You know, yeah.
And I find that on that, Lawry, that topic is that a lot of companies I come across, you can see a culture where the leadership don't trust the front line, and they feel that the front line are, in a way, there's only a certain level they can operate to. They're not intelligent enough. They're not capable enough to... But then you got the front line where they're rocking up to work without their brain engaged or heavily because they're like, well, friggin', they don't want my brain engaged. So the root cause of it is actually leadership behaviour. And I think a lot of organisations just don't know the power they can get if they actually give people autonomy within structure. What, like you said, like it's not autonomy to just go free will like crazy.
Absolutely not.
It's on autonomy within a framework.
Yeah.
And I love that
context.
Within context.
It must be within a context.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and yes, I've come across in many organisations, not just in Incitec, that very thing, where there's this distrust or mistrust of the lower, so-called lower levels.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at that and I think, you know, what's missing from a leadership perspective is the ability to actually create a buy-in for those people to want accountability for, or control over, if you like, over a certain part of the work process.
Yeah.
So you've almost got a chicken and egg. Do we not trust them because they're no good, or is the distrust there because they don't know how they can actually hold people accountable?
Yeah.
And it's not that difficult to make that, as you say, broken bridges. It's not that difficult.
No.
You know?
It can be as simple as, does the front line even know the score? Do they even know what's working, what's not working? Do they even know, do they have any sort of aspirational goals? Like a lot of the time...
And what are they measured against?
Yeah.
If you look at it, you talk about organisational culture, really there's a couple of key things. Yes, the no-brainer is leadership behaviour, the nature of that, or let's just say managers of behaviour, right? The nature of that behaviour sends strong signals about what is highly regarded or not in an organisation. The nature of their human systems, so the way you compensate people, the way you deal with people, the way you develop people or not, sends a message about what's important. How leaders manage and measure people's performance. The way you measure sends a message about what is deemed to be important. Measure the wrong way, behaviour doesn't align. So, well, you know, safety. You're measuring safety by lost time injuries. Well, we'd better hide little minor injuries rather than let's actually measure you by the behaviour to actually create a safe environment as well, not necessarily instead of.
Yeah.
Subtle,
Those
but powerful.
Those leading behavioural measures versus pure resulting measures.
Yeah.
Lawry, one thing I'd like to get your thoughts on and critique on is that, I often find a lot of workplaces, and it can be anywhere, it could be a factory, it could be an office, anywhere, where it's like you got people working there at the front line, but it's like they're on a football field with no scoreboard and they don't really know what the goal is. And I think they're virtually not measuring anything in some cases, and like people are just out there doing their day's work, trying to best they can. But then you do get the situation where some organisations, every now and then the leader rocks down once a week or once a month with the measures and might tell them what the score is.
Yep.
But it's that top-down type of approach. Whereas I see it's like, how do you create an environment where people go out on a football field and they can see they own the score because they've come up with it in a way that's aligned to the company, and they can see the score and they're thinking about how do we improve the score. Is that a good analogy, or what gaps do you have in that?
It is, and I'll break it for you.
Yeah.
It's not to me about owning the score, it's owning the process that results in the score.
Yeah.
And that's critical, because let's take an ideal organisation with really good leadership, and there are some around, right? And I think we did have good elements of that at Incitec, right? And I've come across some organisations, not a lot, to be honest, in the last 20, 30 years with that.
Yeah.
The nature of communication from a leader obviously is vital. It sends a message. So in what way do people understand the big picture? Yeah, I might just be involved in, let's take the maintenance crew. This is maintenance, but where does maintenance fit in the big picture of where we're going as a manufacturing site or a business? And how does my senior management, my direct line and above, communicate that to me? Not once, continuously, because it shifts. Then what's the purpose of that? So what are the drivers? Do I understand the drivers so that when I'm doing my job, I don't only understand what I have to do, but I know what's important about the way I do it. Then you talk about the plan for how we're going to get there. Then what should fall out is clarity about my role and others' role in how we do this. So the so-called 4 Ps.
Yeah.
Picture, purpose, plan, part. When senior management communicate those 4 things in different ways, in an ongoing way, it's not just once. We don't just have the big seminar or the thing up on the wall that says this is our purpose and vision. It's like, no, I can have a coffee with an operator. Go, hey, love what you're doing. You're aware that this fits into the fact that we're actually changing some of these processes, and the way you do this is going to have to change. Oh, let's talk more about that. Suddenly they're understanding the purpose more. Right? So those 4 things, I believe, is where you get that interaction that says, now we can play as a team. I know my role may be discrete, but I know where it fits in the bigger picture. I know why it's important in there, relative and relevant to my role, and where the whole organisation's going.
Yeah.
And some will go, I don't care about that. I just want to know what my work is doing. Fine. The same 4 Ps applies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It just narrows down. It's like, if that's where you're at, fine.
Yeah.
You do find some of those people that go, I just want to just come and do a day's work. Over time, some of them do step up, don't they? And they end up going, I want part of this bigger. It's just their life experience, I guess, is put them in that
I'm not
place.
fussed about the people who just want to come and do a day's work.
Yeah.
As long as they come and go, I just want to do a day's work because there's so much happening in my life. That's actually currently I hold with higher value.
Yeah.
Great. However, if I just come to do a day's work, why not actually get value from it? Does my environment, does the context that I'm in allow me to engage with it?
Yeah.
Or am I just doing it blindly, which some people will?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you do, we know that. Welcome to being human. But it doesn't matter. We're not saying everyone has to be a company man and focused on the big picture. No. But hey, I do my job and I do it well because I know where it fits, and I get a sense of satisfaction out of knowing I'm contributing.
Yeah, that's it. Their satisfaction, even just around that space of I just want to do a good day's work, can go up.
Yeah.
They know the part they play, they know the process they're in, they can see the score and see that the part they're doing is getting a result. They know how it's helping the overall picture.
Absolutely.
So even in that space, they're feeling more fulfilled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lawry, if you look at it, like right back to TQM and even earlier, isn't it? It's like we know the power of self-managed teams within the framework, within the context and the structure.
Yeah.
Like I've seen companies go down the path of self-managed teams where they just said, go free. Just go free and just do.
Holy dooly.
Yeah, it
Yes.
becomes herding cats, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So it's important that everyone, I guess listeners understand there's got to be the framework around it to make it, I guess in a way, make sure that there's alignment and make sure that impediments are removed and we're able to play safely.
Yeah. And I think your word alignment is crucial, because if you look at the so-called 4 Ps, what's that about? That's about making sure that everyone has the opportunity, whether they take it up or not is personal, the opportunity to understand where what they do is aligned. So self-managed work teams, that was the buzzword for quite a while. Do we currently have self-managed work teams? I don't know. I think we've got hybridized versions of that. But what we have are people who are prepared to take on accountability and responsibility, knowing in context what that is producing and what that is creating and where it's influencing stakeholders in the organisation.
Yeah.
At all levels.
Yeah.
And that is probably something quite different to the intent of the self-managed work team model way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was the early days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you look at it,
Yeah.
And I know, Laurie, I'm involved a lot in the world of Agile also now, and I know that is heavily about self-led autonomous teams at the front line. And in some organisations, they're structuring in a way so that, you know, they might own one part of the solution and they can just work by themselves, you know, because they own this slice of the total solution for the customer.
Yes.
But in many organisations, it takes multiple teams to work closely together in alignment to actually get the result.
Yeah.
So in that case, you need that strategic alignment and coordination. Otherwise, you can have absolute chaos.
Absolutely. And I think you also need an understanding of the interdependence across those teams.
Yeah.
And also what the stakeholders' expectations are within and outside the organisation or the work unit.
Yeah, too true.
Accountability and responsibility without that is fraught with danger.
Chaos.
Well, it's chaos, yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot of leadership right now out there in Australia and around the world that want to become more agile. They want to create an organisation that can move faster, adapt more quickly, but they're overburdened because most problems are coming to them, or there's no improvement happening at the front line, and so everything's just clunky and messy. And they want to get there. Based on your knowledge of Incitec back in the 80s and 90s, what you did and John and the team did, and what you've seen since, where would you advise them to start? Like, what would you advise them to do to start to move down this path and actually achieve what you guys did back in Incitec, but what you've helped others do?
Yeah. I think, and it's something I know that you and I have spoken about, I would start with the core management team. But I would start with getting them to understand what they value, not what their values are, what is of high value to them. When they understand that, their personal and professional values will make sense anyway. Right? So we're not talking honesty, integrity type values. It's, you know, I value engagement. If you don't value engagement, then we've got some work to do with you, Mr. Manager. Right? If you value autocracy, then we've definitely got some work to do.
Yeah.
But if you value engagement, if you value the potential of your employees, of your work teams, of your stakeholders, because they are also stakeholders, that's the starting point. So almost a values assessment or a values audit.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it may well be, and this has been my experience for a lot of management teams, when you start to hit the whole values thing, because people think this is all airy-fairy, it's quite confronting.
Yeah.
And for a lot of them, it's probably the first time they've actually been challenged to stop and give voice to what is inside as a value base.
I love that. Like, because I guess it comes back to the start of our conversation, which is at Incitec, you had a unit of leaders that were aligned and collaborating, and also had value most.
I've got to stay at most.
Yeah, you had a tipping point. And you had core values and purpose that were aligned, actually, in most cases.
Became aligned
to work forward.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool advice.
Yeah.
Laurie, how do leaders go about delving into what their core value drivers are? Because I guess most of us, I know even myself before I met you, Lawry.
What did I do to you?
You asked me why, what drives me a lot, and on emotions, but how do you go about it?
You've answered the question. No. Part of me wants to say you don't start with core values. Now, I'm not actually countering what I've said.
Yeah.
You start with what people value.
Yeah.
So what do some of these, so if I was to talk with you about, say, okay, what are the things that, in context, on a professional basis, maybe your life generally, what do you love spending time looking at, reading, following up, researching, what sort of outcomes do you really strive to get in your professional and work life? What do you deem important? What are the sort of things that you want to achieve? When you start to have those conversations, it gives you a sense of the why. I don't like the word why. It's been done to death.
Yeah.
Come to a seminar on Find Your Why. Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
What drives you, we'll always see it in what we do. And it can often be unconscious.
Yeah.
So even at a lower level, an employee who spends their time just doing the work because home either is a problem or they've got so much fulfillment and they spend their time, their personal time, thinking about and working, what am I doing on the weekend? What am I doing with the kids? I'll do my job well.
Yeah.
And then you have a manager who doesn't understand that of what is of value.
Yeah.
And they push them.
Yeah.
It's not to say you don't do your job, but just acknowledge the difference. So looking at what you do, what you research, what outcomes are critical and important to you.
Yeah.
What resources do you bring into what you do tells you something about what is of high value. And that is a shifting picture for a lot of people. As you move on in life, move on different stages of your career, what is of high value will shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Lawry, the key part is to start at what we value, and really I guess part of it too, we are discovering that some sort of greater driver. You can discover your purpose or your why, that greater driver is part of it. And then we might find, Lawry, that a leadership team, half the leadership team, our values don't really align at the moment, what we value to actually creating autonomy at the front line and empowerment. Where do you go then, Lawry? What advice would you go then?
I don't know about advice or getting it right, and obviously this is something that, of course we did confront this at Incitec. So it wasn't carte blanche, everyone's, let's go. Some people, well, you've got to be joking. I want things to say the same. I think we're losing control here. And pretty much any organisation I've dealt with since, much the same.
Yeah.
What my experience is you go with the influential stakeholders, the influential supportive stakeholders. Who has influence and is on board? How do you rally them to create enough momentum of the agenda you're trying to drive?
Yeah.
Now, influence is not necessarily, but it can be positional.
Yeah.
It can be somebody in the works area, manufacturing on the shop floor, but they've got the ear of people.
Yeah.
They've got credibility. They've got influence.
Yeah.
So how do you harness that? In change and transition, there's some beautiful work I love by a fellow called William Bridges, and one of the things he talks about is creating a transition team.
Yeah.
So if you're making change, essentially what he's saying is find people across a range who can have influence, who can start to sow seeds or sense where, hey, we've got blockages here. So who best to start to create influence for somebody who's not on board than somebody who has influence and is on board to do that work.
Yeah.
Task them with it.
Yeah, Lawry, you're playing with social influence there, aren't you?
Do you think?
I got you.
Yeah.
So, like, you, everyone, I guess, Lawry and I have had this chat before, but I guess we've all got our neural pathways and our habits and our paradigms.
But we are
all influenced heavily by what's happening around us, social influence.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're finding the people who have those values that align to the transformation that's happening, you're rallying them together and then creating this movement of social influence that then gradually helps others. And Lawry, the big question I've got then is, can the others alter what they value?
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think if there's anything that I have developed or learnt over the last couple of centuries of being in the workforce, feels like it sometimes. I used to be like a lot of people, bright-eyed and positive, everything's going to work, it's going to be great, and then get pretty upset when, shit, this just didn't work.
Yeah.
I'm a realist to know that you're not going to bring everybody on board.
Yeah.
However, an effective organisation that is working down any path of creating a collaborative workforce, the leader's role to create the environment and context for people to step up into that.
Yeah.
That's a leader's role, to
Yeah.
create the environment and context that they believe is right to move the organisation into the new age in some cases, right? What is required is, I was going to say a plug hole. At some point, something has to happen with people who are in the way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a
And
question on that.
it's got to be done with integrity. Now, often we see that not done with integrity, and that's a different conversation,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But an effective organisation will find ways to, it's better for that person.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if they're moving along and developing a particular set of values that are being developed and demonstrated in people's behaviour, the odd people out, if they've been given sufficient opportunity to get on board to learn, at some point you need a way with integrity to get them out of the organisation. It does everybody, including them, a favour.
Yeah, because they're a square peg all of a sudden in a round hole.
Yeah. It's difficult, there's no question. It's difficult.
So that saying, if you can't change the leader, you need to change the leader, but you need to do that with integrity through the right paths.
Yeah.
And I have seen it, I guess, myself too, Lawry, where a company did a journey to create autonomy.
Yep.
And there was leaders that even came to me directly and just said, Brad, I can't do this.
Yeah. So what can you do? And where can you do it?
Yeah. And they actually ended up just leaving, moving on happily in a way.
Yeah.
Because then they've come to it. But I'm guessing all leaders won't come to that realisation and say, put your hand up, I can't do this.
No.
I need to move on to a place where I can lead the way I want to lead.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think because not all people, not all leaders will do this,
Yeah.
it's onto those other positional, influential stakeholders who are working towards an empowered workforce, shall we say, a properly empowered workforce.
Yeah.
They need to actually be astute enough to pick up on that.
Yeah.
And really, what does it come down to? Have they had the right conversations with each other? Has the executive team actually, it's a very technical word when it comes to communication, have they bothered, it's technical, to have the worthy conversation that's deep and focused about, hey, Brad, things aren't working, let's talk about why. What do you want? What do you want for yourself in your career? Hey, look, it's not working here.
Yeah.
And the other part is, have those leaders had the skilling to be able to identify, and this is what I call behaviour intelligence, understanding the differences in behaviour so that they can create influence for good for each other.
Yeah.
Do they have that conversation?
And Lawry, that's probably another key point, that if you go, right, we get this body of leaders on board and team members where we want to create autonomy and we want to build capability in everyone and have that more self-led within the framework.
Yeah.
And then you go, right, some people are going to be straight on board because the values align.
Yeah.
But there's going to be others that don't. Now, the difference between those ones getting on board or not can be whatever we want to call it. Do you call it, let's just call it development. Someone is developing them and helping them develop and grow to become this other leader.
Yeah.
But I see in a lot of organisations that we don't put the time into that. We're busy, we're flat out with other stuff, and we don't put the time into really having those, are you happy if I just use the word coaching, developmental type conversations?
Yeah.
What do you think stops us doing that and actually putting the time into truly trying to develop and help someone grow to become this new leader of the future that we need?
Yep. I reckon there's a lot of things, obviously, but two things. One, have they actually got the skills to do that?
Okay.
Fine. Because I believe coaching is a very fundamental element of a leadership skill.
Yeah.
Yep. But the other thing is, it's interesting. Take what drives culture. What are those senior people being measured on?
Too true.
Therefore, what have they been shown is of value. And how does that translate in terms of their behaviour down the line?
Yeah.
Come back to the core things that influence an organisation's culture. What is the nature of our vision? Tells you what's important. What is the nature of our leadership? So what behaviours do people see on the ground? What sort of human systems do we have? And what and how do we measure?
Yeah.
It equally applies to the shop floor operator as much as the senior manager.
Yeah.
You know,
Measures
the
drive
CFO.
behaviours.
Yeah.
Measures drive behaviour.
Measures tell you what is deemed important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we measured individualistically, which drives an every person for themselves approach?
Yeah.
Are we measured and rewarded as a team?
Yeah. Or is there a room for both, which I think there is.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And I think it's also, let's face it, I don't think you need to be a Rhodes Scholar to appreciate that the majority of people, they'll say, oh, I love change. We don't.
Yeah.
We are not wired to really love change.
Yeah.
Neurologically, it's actually not safe.
Yeah.
So the old fight and flight comes in, so you revert to what's safe.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I tend to find a lot of what I do these days with groups is we actually spend a lot more time understanding the fundamentals of neurology. People go, hang on, I thought we were doing leadership, or we're doing teams, or we're doing change management. And yep. But until we understand the fundamentals that we now know more of than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago,
Yeah.
around how behaviour develops
Yeah.
neurologically. We're not talking about doing a neuroscience course, just fundamentals.
Yeah.
That gives people a different platform to go, holy hell, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we've got another platform to do this sort of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's like, oh, I understand why that happens, and I can see the logic of it. Okay, yes, this makes more sense. I'm willing to now engage more.
I can see why engaging more is of value to me now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just a set of skills. It's actually bedding down new neural pathways, new behaviour patterns.
Yeah.
Right. And doing it in a way that is deemed to be safe
Yeah, got you.
within boundaries.
So I'm guessing on that, Lawry, every leader, even if they're the ones with the aligned values and aligned to the journey, them understanding that can help them evolve and grow.
Yeah.
But then also these leaders where their values currently don't align
Yep.
and their purpose, and they aren't buying in, them understanding how their brain works and how it drives their emotions and their thoughts and their behaviours can really help them go, okay, I get this.
Yeah.
I'm now willing to engage more and willing to go on this journey to learn and develop.
For a lot of people, yes.
Some don't.
Some won't. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a realist. You know, it's not a 100% game.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah.
And it's not a deficit in other people. It's a difference.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that understanding. Like I said, I think it's almost, from a developmental point of view, it's almost malpractice not to help people understand the fundamentals of how behaviour is formed.
Yeah.
Because now we know it.
Yeah.
Simply because in the last 10, 15 years, there's a lot more imaging technology to help us see more about how do Lawry and Brad actually develop this behaviour and this behaviour. Oh, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
It's fine for the PhDs who want to get mind boggled, but
Yeah.
there are some fundamentals that people look at and go, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Right, that's the platform on which I can develop. And I know why we're doing it this way,
Yeah.
because I'm developing new pathways.
Yeah.
And I now know what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to, on this point, Lawry, put a plug in for the Queensland Brain Institute,
Absolutely.
which is out in our backyard. They're doing a lot of great work.
Yeah.
And I've had approval from them to include some content in a new book. That new book you've provided content for too. That's just great, isn't it? Southeast Queensland, there's a lot happening here.
Oh, take over the world. I'm all for world domination.
We will help the world from Southeast Queensland, Brisbane.
We are.
Yeah, it's good.
And yes, QBI, Queensland Brain Institute, they're doing some amazing work.
Yeah.
In fact, it doesn't matter, I've just been interstate and I talk to colleagues overseas. They hear about some of these things.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
some of the research coming out that impacts organisational, not just mental health and so on. They're working across a vast array.
I know. Hats off to them. And we've just plugged it into the world of the ether through podcasting and everything else we do.
Yeah.
Hey, Lawry, you know, it's been an amazing conversation, and I've gained value from just sitting here talking about it. It seems so simple, but it's not easy, is it? Like, it seems so simple, but it's not easy. You're talking 5-6 years with Incitec to get the path you got. You know, it could be
to start to visibly see, palpably see a culture shift. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to be in it for the long game.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a challenge in that, isn't there, when you can get such fluidity in senior leadership teams.
Absolutely.
Currently in the world.
Part of the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no different to I won't go into politics, but yeah, how long a term are you in for, and what are you going to do in that term? I'm going to make a difference, and then you go.
Yeah.
Or you get promoted, or you go to another department.
So you're naturally driven to the quick wins because it's like, well, I might not be here in 3 years.
Yeah.
And I guess I see companies like BHP where Mike Henry's been there a long time and touch wood will continue to be there, and many of their past leaders have been there long terms. And then also family organisations where you can get leaders hold there for a long time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of companies where there's so much fluidity in that senior leadership team.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them? Is it just stop that? Implement succession planning?
I think it's, if they're going down that pathway and you've got this scattered approach, I do think it's back to, let's do a little bit of a drivers or a values assessment. What are we doing and what is actually driving us to want to go this direction?
Yeah.
When the driver, we talk about drivers, economic drivers, political drivers, market force drivers, then there's the internal drivers for the management group. Right? They're the bigger picture, big reasons why going a certain direction makes sense. Working at that level, it's almost like, okay, it's back to the whole context and rationale. When someone understands the high level as well as the lower level context of why something is on the table, they may or may not like it, but they then understand more about what's behind getting on with it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where you would go back.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like, yeah, you want to do this in this little work unit or this little department or division, great.
Yeah.
But if the interdependencies across the others are going to filter it out and water it down, the secret that I think we had was that we had at a senior level an understanding that this brave new world journey into TQM and self-directed teams and all the cultural stuff as well as the systemic, we had an understanding generally at that senior level that this was not, we're not going to trial it in a part in manufacturing or in marketing or in whatever. This was the company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, obviously, with the BHP, it's a monolith. That's huge.
And they're doing it. It's the company.
Yeah.
Which is a credit to them.
For sure.
So I'm guessing there's part to it there, which is you need to form together the plan. You need to be looking at it as a company. You need to start to get clarity on it, both that behavioural piece, but also the systemic piece. And then I'm guessing too, Lauren, and I want to throw this out there. If you do have some fluidity in the leadership team, the senior leadership team, the key is that you hire leaders with that aligned purpose and values, and then they're gonna slot in and actually help it go forward.
Yep.
The trick, but I guess, is if you're hiring people that don't align to that, then you've got carnage.
You do.
So the fluidity can, I guess, any form of too crazy fluidity is going to be a nightmare, but some fluidity can work as long as you hire the people with the aligned values and purpose.
Yeah, and you think of it, when you look at aligned values and purpose, that's quite strategic. So recruitment must be a strategic process.
Yeah.
It must satisfy the drivers.
Yeah.
So the drivers essentially make sense of the company's purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Make sense of the direction they're going in. Make sense of the roles and responsibilities people have and how they ought to work. Make sense of the nature of relationships that they have.
Yeah.
And you can look at alignment or misalignment across all that. Then systems and processes. Are they aligned?
Yeah.
But everything will start with the key drivers.
Yeah.
Internal and external drivers.
Yeah. You're really getting deep into being absolutely clear on your values and your principles, all those pieces around it, and also your vision and your purpose, and really bringing that in as a core fundamental of everything, all the human systems, the hiring systems and everything.
Yep.
One thing I find, but Lawry, in Australia, you and I spoke, I don't see that many organisations that are doing this.
Yep.
And I think with companies that get advanced, like as they become better and better and better at this, like a BHP that's down this path, or I'm seeing like Signet's been quite advanced, Priestley's has been getting quite advanced. I personally believe that succession planning is critical then, because I do think it's a bit of Russian roulette sometimes when you hire external, because it's just not common. But what's your thoughts on that? Internal succession planning, as you get this culture really going, succession planning becoming critical.
I'd do a bob each way.
Okay.
To be honest, because I think you're saying it's a risk to do external, but if you are really sharp on what you're looking for, what's the fit for an individual? Yes, there's a skill base, there's an experience base that hopefully supports the required skills for the fundamental role, be it an executive role or an operational role, a strategic role. But then you start to put in as one of our expectations and one of our requirements for the role is a culture fit, is a values fit. That's strategic.
Yeah.
And one of the problems you have is as people evolve in an organisation, at some point in time, to me it's just common sense, there will be that element of groupthink.
Yeah.
You know, so before, for example, before we went into the whole TQM and teams approach, what was the organisation's mindset if the organisation did have a mindset? Let's say it did,
Yeah.
like the general mindset.
Yeah.
It was actually within a particular tunnel.
Yeah.
And then you start to bring something in that's going to break that up and go, we want to shift this,
Yeah.
right? So if you're part of that tunnel, you need, in some cases, I'll use the word interference or perturbation. You want to perturb the system.
Yeah.
You want someone who can come in with the right value base, who's prepared to actually make a shift and influence,
Yeah.
and it will be uncomfortable for people,
Yeah.
right?
To-
Yes, you can get that internally, but you can also get that externally.
Yeah, great, Lawry. It's
Yeah.
a really good point. I'm guessing you just need to be skilled at how you do it externally. Like you said, you've got to be very clear on it.
Yep.
Lawry, one final question I've got for you, mate, is like, what would be your 2-minute tip if you and I were chatting to a senior leader and we were wanting to give them a tip? Look, here's 2 minutes on how to really start to shift your company enterprise excellence. What would be that 2-minute tip?
Yeah, it probably would be more a series of questions rather than a tip.
Great.
Yeah, tip's a lot more expensive. You know, I think the question is about, okay, Mr. Business Owner, Mr. Corporate Executive, you know, Miss Corporate Executive, your organisation is heading in a particular way. How clear are you about the direction and how everybody else ought to be involved in that?
Yeah.
How are they being engaged? How are they understanding where they fit in this?
Yeah.
All the way down to bottom line.
Yeah.
What are you doing to make sure that your answer, in principle, is aligned with the answer of the person on the shop floor?
Yeah.
That's the question,
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant.
you know?
And I'm thinking, Lawry, too, there's two parts to that. Like you're saying, there's a part of that, they know where we're going, but also that culture, the values alignment piece that you're mentioning
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I need to know what am I a part of and where is it going?
Yeah.
So I see where I am with it.
Yeah.
How I do it, that's a personal choice. You
Yeah,
know?
you're right. There's
Yeah.
many ways to then go about it from there.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, I really appreciate your time and knowledge,
It's been a
mate.
pleasure
And
to
I'm
have a
looking
chat.
forward.
Always is.
I'm looking forward to every other chat we do have down the local coffee shop.
Oh yeah, there'll be more.
Yeah. And mate, Laura, how can people reach out to you if they want to engage and learn more?
Yep. Look, they can come through you to get me. They can get me on my website,
Yep.
LawryScandar.com,
Yep.
LawryScandar.com.
Yeah.
Just be aware that I don't like the word retired. People ask me, oh, you're still working, you're retired. And I say, well, I'm actually so.
Yeah.
And they go, what do you mean? I'm selectively occupied. So don't expect a fancy website or anything like that. You know, I've done a lot of this work for a long time, and I'm now just being fairly selective
Yeah.
as to how much and where and who I do this with.
No, good on
And
you.
as you know, I'll work with people who are fair income about it. They're serious.
Yeah.
They may well be right behind the 8 ball, but that's fine. So yeah, my website's probably the easiest thing, or through you.
Laurie, really appreciate it, mate.
It's a pleasure.
Like I said, I'm looking forward to all the chats we continue to have, and thanks for helping us create a better future, mate.
We will together.
Thanks,
That's-
Laurie.
Needs people like us. Thanks,
Cheers,
mate.
mate.
All the best.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
What a great episode. Remember, there's many resources on the Enterprise Excellence podcast website that you can download on this very topic under resources. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this show. The firstly was the power of understanding the values and the drivers of the leaders in the most senior leadership team, and then the cascade from there. And how do they align to the culture that you're looking to grow and foster and develop? That simple starting point, starting with what drives the current leaders, their purpose, their values and their key drivers, and then looking at, right, how can we collaborate the leaders on the journey and align to it already? How do we help the others develop and grow? Which leads me to the second key point I took away from the episode, which is the power of social influence. Like, we know there's 2 key drivers to habit. One is the habits you've already got, you know, that neural pathway makeup in your mind, that your paradigms just drive your habit. The other part is social influence. So engaging the leaders that are aligned on the journey already, bring them into play to then support the other leaders where their values and purpose may not align to the culture you're looking to foster and grow, and supporting them to develop through coaching, feedback, training, any development avenue to help them really align in behaviourally and culturally to the journey and really help the organisation move forward. And of course, if there is the old leader that just can't shift, it's how do you respectfully help them find the path that suits them for their future. What a great episode. Thanks again, Lawry. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your time, everything you have done, everything you continue to do to help us create a better future. Bye for now.